Hello, everybody out there in radio or internet land, if you're listening to this online. This is a weekly program. We come on to your radio dial to talk about what is really going on here in the Kalamazoo community, as well as the state of Michigan, the so called United States, and the rest of the world from a working class perspective and generally calling out the establishment on its BS. Y'all are listening to Media Cyphers only on 89.1 WIDR Kalamazoo. As always, the following thoughts, views, and opinions are not necessarily those of 89.1 WIDR or Western Michigan University, no matter how dope or insightful they may turn out to be. So we've got a pretty packed show for y'all today. Usually it's kind of traditional on the show. We start with local issues and then kind of branch outwards. But we're going to kind of do it back arsewards today. We are going to be starting with some more statewide and national coverage because in our second hour, we're going to be spending basically the entirety of the hour with a couple of critical issues, looking at some things going on here in the Kalamazoo community. Join us around 1:15 p.m. We're going to be interviewing some folks, sorry, from We the People, Michigan, about the city's proposal to use ARPA slash COVID-19 relief funds to do renovations over at the Arcata Creek Festival site. And we're also going to be joined by Ewan Simpson closer to, about 12:50, 1 o'clock, talking about their effort to get more public restrooms installed in the downtown area. Before that, though, we're going to start with some statewide and international stuff. And as many of you have already heard, we've got some more updates about the ongoing genocide in Gaza. And it is, there's some local, there's some very local, there's some national stuff. But suffice to say, for those of you who have not heard, on the evening of the Super Bowl, excuse me, Israel started a siege on Rafah. And what it actually entailed is a beginning of a ground invasion of Rafah in southern Gaza, where over 1 million Palestinians have sought refuge from the rest of the area, basically evacuating to an area that the Israeli government told them to. One top EU official said it could lead to a, quote, unspeakable humanitarian catastrophe. Some of the images on the ground from the attack on Rafah are it's really difficult to well look at or even read about. But the horrific carnage and just absolute lack of empathy or I guess the kind of just the savagery being enacted against the people of Gaza has really escalated, even more than what we've been seeing over these previous months. And what we have been seeing on the ground again is just deplorable, disgusting, hard to watch without traumatizing yourself. In the midst of it, we've also seen kind of a ratcheting up of propaganda to kind of excuse or sidestep the genocide that is going on in Gaza. That includes high-profile advertisements during the Super Bowl down to billboard advertisements here in the city of Kalamazoo. And I actually wanted to call attention to something that I saw last week when I was walking around campus. And there is this mobile truck. It's well known, particularly in the New York slash Times Square area of this organization called jewbelong.org, which historically has kind of been a mixture of anti-Semitist messaging, very innocuous, and sometimes often progressive. You're like, if you don't like gay marriage, don't get one, kind of thing. But they have taken, I mean, they've always been very explicitly pro-Zionist, and in fact, it's kind of like, they sprinkle the pro-Zionist along with a lot of the progressive messaging, but since the genocide in Gaza began, they have really ratcheted up those propaganda efforts explicitly to try to get people on the wrong side of this issue, the wrong side of history, or to side against the people of Gaza who are being indiscriminately bombed and besieged as we speak. And one of those billboard trucks was on campus. And when I first saw this, they were parked in front of the Old Goat Tavern, and I really didn't know much about this organization. There is a fairly innocuous message about anti-Semitism that was morally correct. They're like, hey, anti-Semitism is bad. Um, but right away, I was like, my BS senses were tingling. I was like, if it was just that, I'm sure, I would support this truck. And I even try to kind of half convince myself, hey, maybe this is just because there has been a rapid increase of anti-Semitism in the United States, largely propelled by white nationalists and people on the far right. But some photos taken later on in Kalamazoo last Thursday showed that one of the messages was a little bit more explicitly political in nature. At one point here in the city of Kalamazoo, on the side, one of the sides of the truck read, "Feminists, do you think Hamas would march for you? Don't bet your life on it." So let's break this down just a little bit. We've got this mobile truck here in the Kalamazoo community that has been very outspoken about where it stands on this issue. Our city is among a handful of cities in the country that has called for a ceasefire at the municipal level. Michigan is one of the most high-profile states coming up in the general election, and the Arab American diaspora has been very outspoken in saying this is a deal breaker for them during the next election. And we have this truck, it's kind of AstroTurf truck, coming into the community to spread this very disingenuous propaganda. And let's just break down um, this whole thing. So it relies on a very specific sort of Orientalism that your brain is kind of trained to think, oh, Muslim, Islamic terrorist, they're misogynistic, they hate women, etc. Um, and also just again painting anybody in Gaza as an anti-woman barbarian who it's okay to indiscriminately murder. Well, let's break down one thing. First of all, okay, I will admit I haven't done a deep dive into the gender politics of Hamas, but I do know enough to know that they as an organization, as a group, don't have the same exact line as say the Taliban. It also does a great job at erasing the history of feminist Palestinian resistance, of which there is a very long and storied history. In fact, even during a couple of the more high-profile intifadas, um, a lot of the specific on-the-ground assault teams, etc., were comprised of women. A lot of the suicide bombing squads, where whatever your thoughts are on that on a moral and ethical level, were largely women. Um, and there's a great podcast episode from Rev Left Radio that really talks about again this were not people who were forced to do this thing. They took a principled ideological stance and were willing to kind of put themselves on the line for it. Again, whatever you may think of that as a tactic, but and and also one of the most famous images of Palestinian resistance overall is from sorry is a young woman who was part of the Palestinian Front, uh, the PFLP, the People's Front for the Liberation of Palestine. Um, Holding an AK cheerfully, and there's usually a quote under that talking about how the ideal state would be a one state Palestine where is Israeli or sorry, where Jewish and Arabs could live in peace together with equal rights. So, it's again very disingenuous. It leans into a lot of these very thoroughly Western ideas about what the Islamic boogeyman is. And again, let's point out, you know what's not very feminist? Um, Doing besieging a population for over 3 months, killing over 20,000 people, most of them being women and children. But yes, that is not very feminist, I should say. And it's important to kind of buck against a lot of these astroturf things that show up in our community, because they're trying to muddy the waters. And I again, when I saw this, that's really the most insidious thing. I walk past it, I see a really insidious message against anti-Semitism, which is good. And then maybe just a few minutes later, they flip their sign around to something that's trying to justify the Israeli government's genocide of the people of Gaza. Don't believe the hype. And again, when you see stuff like that, it might be worth just doing a little bit of Googling to see what side an organization like that is really on. Because again, they try to hook you in with some of these progressive sounding things, and with a baseline of anti-Semitism is bad, which is something we should all agree with, and then twist it around to justify what the Israeli government is currently doing. So yeah, I don't know if the truck will be back around, but keep that in mind if you see it. Big pink truck. With again, very just like that is such a that's kind of a cringe name too. I was reading an article about how like a lot of younger Jewish people in New York just talk about how cringe it is because even the name of it, jewbelong, I don't know. Uh, it's it sounds uncomfortable even saying it on air. Like I don't know. Anyway, um, I'm going to kind of pivot now to another statewide story. Again, talking about what's going on in Gaza, and I'm going to be reading from an article from LeftVoice by Ryan McCarty. University of Michigan Faculty Senate approves divestment resolution. The University of Michigan Faculty Senate recently passed a measure calling for divestment from companies investing in Israel's attacks on Gaza. Will the university's capitalist bosses change course and support democratic demands to stop funding genocide? This was published on February 4th. The University of Michigan Faculty Senate passed a measure Monday calling for the university's leadership, including the Board of Regents, to divest from its financial holdings in companies that invest in Israel's ongoing military campaign in Gaza. The statement referenced reports published by The Guardian, Haaretz, The Washington Post, Amnesty International, and Human Rights Watch, all of which have highlighted the unprecedented rate of civilian deaths in Gaza, and that American financial sources are central to Israel's ongoing genocide. The vote built on broad organizing work on campus and across the community by Students Allied for Freedom and Equality, the Tahrir Coalition, and faculty and staff for justice in Palestine, among others. During voting, a large group of students held a vigil outside. The faculty statement referenced precedents for divestment, pointing to the University of Michigan's 1983 divestment from companies doing business in South Africa with their apartheid regime, and its more recent decision to exit its investments in Russia in response to the war in Ukraine. A motion to refer questions of a divestment to the Financial Affairs Advisory Committee was brought to the vote by opponents of divestment. However, this motion, largely seen as a measure to effectively drown the movement for divestment, failed. Ooh. The University of Michigan's recent history of investment in oppressive regimes is deeply problematic. Though supporters of divestment tried to garner support from the university by appealing to its history, cutting ties with the apartheid government in South Africa, Professor Derek Peterson, the sponsor of the current divestment resolution, noted that Michigan was on the wrong side of history in the 70s and 80s, when leadership resisted student demands to divest from companies that did business with apartheid South Africa. It took extraordinary measures, an act of the state legislature, to finally get the university's leadership to agree to divest, and even then, they did so with great reluctance. Peterson offered a hopeful appraisal after the faculty senate passed the resolution. The motion passed by the assembly this week builds on a basic principle that being the leaders and the best is an ethical vocation, not only an academic or athletic mission. I hope that the regions see in the resolution an opening to reconsider Michigan's position and to accept that our money should not be used to fund a bloody, inhumane war. Going on, it is unclear if the Board of Regents, made up of 6 Democrats and 2 Republicans, will seriously consider the university's connections with groups investing in Israel's mass slaughter of Palestinians. In 2017, after the central student government passed a measure asking for the formation of a committee to investigate options for divesting from companies involved in Palestinians' human rights violations, the regents refused to even consider such requests. The university administration and regents have also ignored several freedom of information requests and a recent measure passed by the faculty senate asking for the university to assess and publicize the financial investments by the university in the state of Israel. To further cast doubt on the likelihood that the university is planning on taking the measure seriously, Josh Shatas, the University of Michigan chief financial officer, spoke at the faculty senate meeting, noting that it has been the university's unwavering policy to shield the endowment from political pressures and to base its investment decisions on financial factors such as risks and return and applicable law. Adding that the elected board of regents who oversee the university governance and its multi-billion-dollar endowment should only consider the university's financial health and its mission-centric investment philosophy. That's capitalist speak, folks, for we only care about that money and the bottom line, not we don't care if it's bloody money as long as we get that back. Anyway, there are several important lessons to take away from the faculty senate vote and the university administration's response. The most obvious is that for administrators of large capitalist research institutions, war profiteering is acceptable as long as it is very profitable. Another is that despite widespread claims that university protests against Israel's rampant human rights violations are motivated by anti Semitism, the Faculty Senate resolution was explicitly limited to Israel's military and included language insisting that the Senate Assembly calls for divestment is not a request to end support, academically or financially, for any of U of M's partnerships with Israeli colleges or universities, or to otherwise imply ending any assistance provided to faculty and students in support of research and education in Israel. While it would certainly not be anti-Semitic to call for divestment from Israeli universities or for divestment from Israel completely, the faculty senate's call for targeted military divestment seems strategically aimed to both avoid such criticism and to steer clear of the state of Michigan's anti-BDS laws and disciplinary action from the university itself, which in the past few years has punished faculty and grad students who cited divestment language in their refusals to write letters of recommendations for students applying to programs in Israel. Finally, the faculty senate vote in favor of this divestment shows that with concerted efforts, even traditionally reticent representative groups can be convinced to speak out against atrocities and those who support them financially. It will be important to build on this coalition building momentum going forward, both to continue to put pressure on the university administration and regents to call for a free Palestinian state and to follow through on divestment, including divestments that go beyond the military sector, targeting the entire colonial endeavor oppressing Palestinians. Again, that article was from LeftVoice, written by Ryan McCarty. University of Michigan Faculty Senate approves divestment resolution. And, I'm hoping, if there's any students kind of tuning in, listening, uh, you know, uh, there is a thought. What about something comparable being done here at Western Michigan University? Wouldn't be so far-fetched. We've already got a lot of support in the community, and as I mentioned earlier, city of Kalamazoo is one of the handful of cities in the United States that has passed a ceasefire resolution. So wouldn't be too far-fetched to see that maybe us Broncos could be the next to attempt or pull off such a thing. We will link to that in our show notes too, if you would like to read more about it or read that article for yourself. In any case, we're going to take a quick little break. We come back. We've got more to talk about on the show. Y'all listening to Media Cyphers only on 89.1 WIDR or online at widerfm.org. Also, quick reminder, you can find us online. We have our Media Cyphers podcast. That's Media Cyphers Kalamazoo. You can find it on most podcasting applications. We also have a YouTube page. You can watch all of our episodes. If you don't get a chance to tune into us on the radio, you can look us up later, share it with your friends if you're so inclined. And also check out our Facebook page, subscribe to that for consistent updates. Keep your dial locked. This is Media Cyphers, your only source for political revolution. Hello again, everybody out there in Radio Land. Y'all listening to Media Cyphers, only on 89.1 WIDR or online at widerfm.org. So our next story, this is about some local Michigan politics, and some of you may have seen this making the rounds on social media, but it's Michigan Representative Josh Shriver recently was sharing out memes related to the Great Replacement theory, which is it's the idea that in particular Jewish oligarchs, oh boy, are using their money to try to facilitate immigration and reproduction of non-white people in both the United States and the broader like white European West. Um, and it's something that used to only be in the annals of white supremacist message boards, but has unfortunately over the last few years of increasing right-wing extremism, gained a lot of cachet among even more mainstream conservatives, up to and including a lot of commentators. Tucker Carlson made allusion to it when he still had his program. But it does look like there were at least some consequences. And I wanted to talk about this story here. This comes to us from Bridge, Michigan. Michigan lawmaker sanctioned over racist, hateful, and bigoted speech. And man, this dude looks like an alt-right troll. Like I'm looking at a picture of him, it's like this guy looks like the person who goes onto your Facebook and just says like the most racist, misogynistic stuff you could think of. I mean, you can't judge a book by its cover, but I'm like, this dude looks like a white F boy, just painted all over him. Anyway, uh, going on. Michigan House leadership on Monday announced professional sanctions against Representative John Shriver, an Oxford Township Republican who has refused to apologize after sharing on social media what colleagues on both sides of the aisle has decried as a racist meme. House Speaker Joe Tate from Detroit said he is removing Shriver from previously assigned committees, pulling his funding allotments for office functions, and reassigning his staff because of what he called racist, hateful, and bigoted speech by the freshman lawmaker. Shriver has a history of promoting debunked theories and dangerous rhetoric that jeopardizes the safety of Michigan residents and contributes to a hostile and uncomfortable environment for others, Tate said in a statement. Shriver, who will still be able to vote in the Michigan House, did not immediately respond to a request for comment. Nor did a spokesman for House Minority Leader Matt Hall, Republican from Richland, who has not weighed in since Shriver endorsed the Great Replacement theory, which falsely claims a concerted agenda to eliminate the white race through immigration. Other Republicans have criticized their colleague, however. All people have a moral obligation to speak out against hate whenever it rears its ugly head. This is one of those times. State Representative Donnie Steele, Republican from Orion Township, said in a Friday statement decrying the social media post by Shriver, who represents a nearby portion of Oakland County. Hateful rhetoric goes against everything I believe and distracts from the positive work we're trying to accomplish for the people of Michigan, Steele said. In a weekend Facebook post, GOP Senator John DeMoose of Harbor Springs bemoaned Shriver's sickening words, which he said have nothing to do with the ideals we claim to uphold as Americans or conservatives. Republicans should know that anything other than a swift and strong rebuke of such filth undermines everything we say, everything we believe, and everything we're trying to accomplish in terms of rebuilding the shining city on the hill to which we point to so often, Moose said. Shriver has not directly discussed the controversy, but in a series of subsequent social media posts, he has accused the media of attempting to start a race war and alleged an anti-white agenda against those who have shared the theory. So again, that was published on February 12th, and for like a little deeper dive into this, it is this is kind of a concept we talked about on the show before of conservative propaganda basically creating a monster and now having to deal with it, which is to say, they have made racist allusions against immigrants, against black folks, against Muslims for decades and decades and decades, trying to squeeze every little drop of dog whistle energy that they can out of their base. And the fruit it is born is like you now have these younger people, you can think of also of like Marjorie Taylor Greene, Lauren Boebert, Matt Gaetz, etc., who they are true believers to a lot of this crazy racist conspiracy stuff. The people, the children who were raised listening to right wing conservative um, radio are now running for Congress and then winning seats. And this is kind of an example of it with this Josh Shriver character. And it's worth noting too. This is not. I was thinking about the class dynamics here. He's from Oakland County, and this is not like some country bumpkin or somebody from the UP or somewhere that is often caricaturized as being hyper racist and exclusionary. This is from a district that represents much of the Detroit metro area, much of the, I should say, Pontiac slash, uh, outer Detroit suburbs, such as Troy. So it actually syncs up a lot with what we've talked about on the show before, which is like, the primary base for these type of far right grievance politics. It's not out in the country. It's not out in the rural areas. Granted, a lot of those areas do tend to vote Republican, but what we see time and time again is the lily white suburbs are the places that are really most excited to put people like Josh Shriver in place. Not even like a lot of the more middle of the road conservatives you hear being interviewed in this article, who actually do represent more rural areas here in Michigan. There is an appetite for in these kind of suburban areas for somebody who can represent unabashedly and unashamedly a lot of these racist grievance politics that we see pop up in figures like Josh Shriver, like Marjorie Taylor Greene, et cetera, et cetera. And part and parcel of that is embracing these conspiracy theories that literally started up from white supremacist and neo-Nazi websites and have been allowed to bubble up into the mainstream of American politics. And I think it's again something that we should keep in mind because as we move forward into this upcoming election and a lot of the instability that we've been witnessing since the beginning of the year, the year started with Texas and almost half of the rest of America threatening a civil war over Texas's right to be brutal to immigrants. So we're not going to see these kinds of politics disappear anytime soon. And it's really important to kind of understand the dynamics of what class is embracing these politics, who by and large is giving the financial support to people like Josh Schreiber, and it is in Marxist terms what we call the petty bourgeois. the people who live in the burbs with oversized trucks, cosplaying as the working class a lot of the time. And maybe listening to Toby Keith. Sorry, that's bad taste. The man ruined country music. I'm sorry. um, all that nationalist propaganda. Anyway, if you want to read more from the Bridge, Michigan article, we will link to it in the show notes. That headline of that article: Michigan lawmaker sanctioned over racist, hateful, and bigoted speech. That was written by Jonathan Oosting, published on February 12th. So yeah, just yesterday. Y'all listening to Media Cyphers only on 89.1 WIDR or online at widerfm.org. Your only source for political revolution. Quick reminder, you can find us several ways. We've got a podcast you can find that is Media Cyphers Kalamazoo. We've also, I'm sorry. We've also got a YouTube page where you can find most of our episodes after we air them. And we are also on Facebook. You can find most of our updates over there. Keep your dial locked. Y'all are listening to 89.1 WIDR or online at widerfm.org, your only source for political revolution. We will be right back. Out there in radio land, y'all listening to Media Cyphers only on 89.1 WIDR or online at widerfm.org. So we got one more story. This is about um, the state of trans rights, and this comes to us from Truth Out, and it's a kind of disturbing story about how Democrats and Republicans in West Virginia united to pass an anti-trans bill, which I think has a lot of implications and food for thought for us as we progress in this election season and looking at how a lot of our liberal colleagues and those who would seek to represent us in Congress, we need to ask some hard questions about where they actually fall on the issue of trans rights, because it appears from this story that in this case they were willing to throw trans people under the bus. This is an article by Zane McNeil. It was published yesterday from Truth Out. House Democrats in West Virginia help Republicans pass anti-trans bill. West Virginia Democrats aligned with Republicans in the House of Delegates on Friday to pass a bill, HB 4233, that bars the term non-binary from appearing on birth certificates and mandates the inclusion of a person's sex, male/female, on the document. While West Virginia already prohibited changing the gender marker on both certificates to non-binary, LGBTQ advocates condemned the Democrats who voted in favor of the bill, saying that their votes revealed where they stand on transgender rights. This isn't even a thing. You can change birth certificates, but not to non-binary. So the Dems who say it's a do-nothing bill did something to their voter base. West Virginia author and ACLU West Virginia staff member Jamie Miller said on social media. It speaks volume to the people in West Virginia that you disregard while voting for your own interests. The Democrats who voted for the bill include Hollis Lewis, Joey Garcia, Kayla Young, Rick Griffith, Sean Hornbuckle, and self-proclaimed lefty Sean Fluharty. By approving this bill, Democrats not only disregard the identities of non-binary and gender non-conforming West Virginians, but also overlook the existence of intersex people within their state. According to the United Nations Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights, an estimated 1.7% of people are born with intersex traits or atypical sex characteristics. Laws like this reinforce the dangerous yet prevalent practice of forcing intersex children to undergo surgeries to alter their gonads, internal reproductive organs, and genitals to conform more closely to stereotypical male or female characteristics. These surgeries can cause psychological distress in children who grow up to identify as a gender different than the one their bodies were surgically altered to be more like. Critics, often liberal Democrats, may question why the non binary birth certificate ban draws condemnation when seemingly few people care about the issue. Perhaps these critics should consider that standing on the side of the oppressor sends a harmful message. Morgantown City Council member Brian Butcher wrote on his blog in response to the vote. Intersex individuals are born at roughly the same rate as red-haired individuals. By endorsing this bill, you have just told every constituent who has been born intersex or with intersex children that they simply do not exist in the eyes of the law. In one study on intersex people, 81% of participants had been subjected to surgeries due to their intersex status, 50% of whom developed psychological problems. Because of this, human rights organizations have denounced this practice, asserting that such procedures are medically unnecessary and pose the risk of causing lifelong suffering. While the ACLU West Virginia opposed this bill, advocates criticized LGBTQ groups, including Fairness West Virginia, that didn't publicly track its progression. The ACLU of West Virginia, alongside LGBTQ plus activists and organizers, made it clear this bill would cause direct harm to the trans community in West Virginia. Transgender activist Ash Orr said on social media, while that there was silence from other LGBTQ plus adjacent organizations in this state. West Virginia lawmakers had advanced an additional 25 anti-LGBTQ bills since the start of this year. In total, more than 400 anti-LGBTQ bills have been introduced in state legislatures across the country since January 1st. And that was an article from Zane McNeil. It was published yesterday from Truth Out. House Democrats in West Virginia help Republicans pass anti-trans bill. Well, we're going to take another quick little break, but when we come back, we're going to be spending the rest of today's episode interviewing some local organizers about local organizing. When we come back from break, we're going to be talking with Ewan Simpson from the Southwest Michigan Democratic Socialists of America to talk about their efforts to install more public bathrooms downtown. And then later on in the program, around 1:15, we're going to be talking with a couple of organizers from We the People Michigan about the city of Kalamazoo's plan to use ARPA COVID relief funds to renovate the Arcadia Creek Festival site and why that is causing some issues for people in the community who would like to see that money used elsewhere. Y'all listening to Media Cyphers only on 89.1 WIDR or online at widerfm.org. Please also follow us on Facebook, and you'll also find pages for us on YouTube, and check out the Media Cyphers Kalamazoo podcast that you can find on most podcasting apps. Stay tuned. We will be right back to Media Cyphers, your only source for political revolution.